here we are in Brighton, and it's the International Day of Peace, and we've gathered to thank each other, because what we're doing is declaring Peace Day a day of gratitude and thanks.
Yeah.
And basically, not everybody can forgive someone on Peace Day, but we reckon that if you thank someone, it's very healing. And sometimes, well, mostly breakdowns in relationships are absolutely always somebody feeling taken for granted or doing something and not noticing. And it all begins with an acknowledgement of the other person who's actually helping you, which we're redefining as acts of peace.
Yeah.
And so if you thank someone, it's very healing, and they can actually move forward and maybe resolve some of their issues and then forgive them. So anyway, in Brighton, which is why we're here, and this is the Mayor of Brighton and Hove, Mayor Bill Randall, and he's come down because I've invited him to come and thank everyone in Brighton for all the peace that's been created for the people who live here, for nature, humanity and environment, because we have a really amazing city. So I've invited him down to thank everyone, but to share about the incredible things that are happening and the work in our community. So can you tell us about, actually something happened today that Bill was up to?
Well, first of all, could I say, I share your view about the expression of peace.
Oh, lovely.
And it is about thanking people as well. And Brighton is an extraordinary city. Brighton Hove, sorry, is an extraordinary city. And it is argued by a lot of people that it has more voluntary organisations and people doing things per head of population than any other city in Britain. Yeah. And I'll just talk about the things I've done today. I went to lunch today with an organisation called Lunch Positive.
Yes.
Which is an organisation that provides lunch once a week for people living with HIV/AIDS.
Wow.
And there were about 60 people there today. There is one person who runs it all, half-time, paid very little to do it. The rest of the work is done entirely by volunteers.
Wow.
So there were about 12 volunteers there today, cooking and serving and organising. And as I said, about 50 or 60 people turned up to eat, as they do every week. They're able to serve lunch for £1.50, a three-course lunch for £1.50, because they get the bulk of their food from an organisation called Fair Share,
Wow.
which is a national organisation in Britain that collects surplus food from supermarkets and catering companies and then passes it on to voluntary organisations working with those in need.
Wow.
And in Brighton and Hove last year, 250 tonnes of food was given to charitable organisations to redistribute, and Lunch Positive had 7 tonnes of that food. And the interesting thing is they don't know until Thursday what the food's going to be.
Wow.
So it's there used to be a TV programme called Ready, Steady, Cook, where people are given the ingredients, and it's rather like that for them. So they do the menus after they've got the food. But the important thing about what they do is it's not just about the food. It means that people might otherwise be isolated, mostly older men, 1 or 2 women with HIV/AIDS, come together. They come together as a community, but in that place, Lunch Positive can also signpost them to other services they might need for other issues they've got. And that is based almost entirely upon volunteering. After that, I went to
That's amazing.
a reception in the Mayor's Parlour, which is very grand. It is only mine for a year. I'm only Mayor for a year. And I had a meeting there with a group of independent volunteers who are people who work with children in care. They befriend children in care. Brighton and Hove has almost 500 children in care, a disproportionate number for a city of its size. 49 of them under the age of 1, almost entirely there because of their parents' substance or alcohol abuse.
Goodness.
And in a paradoxical way, that's good, because if you get those children early, you can foster them out before the damage is too great for them to survive. But the independent visitors are people who befriend these children and then young adults, and they're there for the long haul. Some of them have done it for 7 or 8 years. There's a man there tonight who has befriended the same man and worked with him for the last 7 years. The guy he's working with is in psychiatric care at the moment. He's completely estranged from his family. The only people he sees is his lovely man Eddie, who is in his 60s, and his social worker.
Wow.
And Eddie provides him with all the sort of things you and I take for granted. And they do stuff with kids who are really disadvantaged. They take them to football matches. They might take them to McDonald's. I don't entirely approve of McDonald's, but it's an experience lots of kids get.
Yeah.
They take them to the beach and to castles and historic places. And they're very, very important because, of course, children in care sometimes might move 5 or 6 times during their time in care. But the independent visitor, goes with them everywhere and provides a continuity they otherwise wouldn't get.
That's incredible.
So that's just 2 things today.
Yes.
And I have days like that
Yes.
almost every day. And the great thing about being mayor is that I meet the best people in the city in the best sense of the word.
Yes.
They're not the wealthiest people.
Yes.
They're not the most celebrated people.
No.
But they're the people who work for their neighbourhoods, for their communities, for organisations like Lunch Positive, for football clubs. Mm-hmm. They work with older people with real issues. Mm-hmm. And they're the sort of people who make the city really buzz and work. And one of the great things about this city is the genuine spirit of partnership between the voluntary organisations, the council, the health service and others. So while we have a huge number of problems, an enormous amount of problems related to alcohol and drugs, an enormous amount of domestic violence, I'm afraid to say, there is nevertheless a huge amount of good work going on, and the city is full of people of good intent. And at the time when all public services are suffering because of cutbacks in money, it's very important that these people are drawn into the fold and that we make the most of every possible resource we've got. I mean, earlier this week I went to speak to the Older People's Council, which is democratic elected people over 60. And as a journalist, I've done a lot of writing, travelling around Europe looking at services for older people. Those that work best are those that treat older people as a resource, not a passive recipient. And in all the work we do, we should be looking at those people who receive services as having something to contribute. And there's all that talent out there that's untapped. So it's not just about patronising people or patting them on the head and giving them stuff to do. It's about liberating them, releasing them, getting them to make a contribution. And I think that's a spirit of peace.
Absolutely. That's just so bang on.
Yeah.
That is so bang on, because we live like peace is somewhere else, but there's probably more peace, acts of peace, than there is war. And there is violence and all that kind of stuff, but then there's also people in their street or the police that are helping them. There's organisations that are in action. And it's not that there aren't problems, it's just that we live like they're so overwhelming. But it really...
as I said earlier, I'm a journalist, and the media's only interested in the problems and not the benign stuff that's going on all the time.
Yes, and that's really what we're up to.
And we mustn't underestimate the problems.
No.
There are problems, of course.
Absolutely.
But, and if you look at the way people talk about young people, you would think all young people are demons because they're demonised. Most kids are perfectly all right. There are, of course, kids with issues and challenges and problems, but most kids are fine.
But one of the things that I noticed is that there's a generalisation about individuals, communities, groups, faiths, and the generalisations are the things that keep things stuck. But what I'm trying to do by inviting people to thank people on Peace Day is that they realise that if they donate money to one of these charities or organisations or give their time, that is an act of peace. So they may be busy all year, but they're giving £2 a month, and that's an act of peace for those children.
I agree.
So maybe peace is here, and if we understand we have the power to help another human being, and we are, it's not so overwhelming. So we can understand that we can do more.
Well,
that everything.
I accept all of that, but there is another side to it all as well, I'm afraid, which is the malign side of things.
Sure.
Which is often expressed in governments and the way that governments behave. But I think certainly starting at the bottom, working through the grassroots and changing people from the bottom is the way forward.
Yeah. And if those people at the bottom understand they are the source of peace, they use their voice to back you,
Yeah.
and those people who are bringing
Yeah,
the
I mean,
change,
I buy all that.
then that
Yeah.
will impact it. And
Yeah.
I think the problem is people are relating to themselves as powerless. So
I agree entirely, yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is
Yeah.
restore the understanding that we can change things.
Well, yesterday, one of the other things I did yesterday was welcome the foreign students who are
Yes.
starting their studies at Brighton University
Yes.
this year. There were 400 of them, and 280 came for tea yesterday. And I sat next to a young man from Romania, very, very bright and very focused, studying at Brighton for the next 3 years. And I said, that's really good. You can take what you've done back to Romania and change things. He said, certainly not. I'm never going back to Romania. It's corrupt.
Right.
And I felt how disappointing, because really, unless people like him do go back,
Yes.
nothing will ever change.
Well, they don't realise they have that kind of power, that they are
Well-
able to do it. So they sit back and watch.
But you can understand, he said,
Sure.
what's the point? The country's entirely corrupt.
Yes.
I can go back and work hard and get no reward for
Yes.
it.
Yes. Well, and that's the problem. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
So-
But in his personal life, he's a peacemaker in his personal life. But when we try to imagine changing big change, we end
Yeah,
up feeling
sure,
not doing
sure.
something because we feel that.
No,
the,
I
the
agree.
bigger
I agree. But
picture-
there is disillusionment as well.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
I'm a councillor as well as being mayor. I've been a
Yes.
councillor for 9 years. The most important thing I do
Yes.
is the work I do in my ward
Yes.
with the people who elected me.
Yes.
And that's about small change and incremental
Exactly.
stuff and making things better for people. Very rarely get the big bang where you change things fundamentally. And I guess, it's this American theory of nudge rather than change. But we all have a responsibility to do this.
Yes.
It's just convincing people that they're able to do it as much as anything,
That's
and the
what my
confidence
plan
to do
is.
it.
Yeah. Is there anyone, or I know you can't pick out individual organisations, but would you like to thank the people of Brighton for their contribution, or is there anyone that you would personally that's helped you like to thank on Peace Day?
There's an awful lot of people.
Yes.
One of the people I would choose is the Chief Superintendent of Police, Graham
Okay.
Bartlett, who understands this city very well. He's not liked in some quarters because he's seen as a liberal policeman.
Uh-huh.
He's somebody, for instance, who believes that drug addiction is a health issue rather than a criminal issue.
Yes.
Selling drugs, making drugs,
Yeah.
distributing them is a criminal fact.
Yes.
But the people who are the victims of that
Yes.
should be treated as having health problems and health
Yes.
issues. And in fact, there has been quite a lot of work done on that in the city. And he would make a business case for it as well.
Oh, right.
There's a clear business case for doing that.
Yes.
If you do it properly, you reduce addiction,
Yes,
which you
yes.
don't do generally by putting people in prison. So I'd want to thank Graham. There is a long list of people I could talk about, people who make a huge contribution. Andrew Comben, who's the director of the festival, Tony Murner, who runs the economic partnership. These are all people who work with others to improve the life of everyone in the city. Julian Crampton, the Vice Chancellor of Brighton University, Lisa Dando, who runs the Women's Centre, Sally Polanski, who runs the community and voluntary sector. There's a long list of people
Yes.
who do remarkable things. This is, as I said before, an extraordinary city,
Yes.
full of extraordinary people.
It is.
Yeah.
So really what I hear you're saying is you're thanking all the people who are working to help each
Of
other.
course, yeah.
And
yeah.
in charities and volunteers.
Yeah.
And
those people who do low-paid jobs for which they get little reward, but still go to work every day and do it.
exactly.
So
Exactly, yeah. No, I agree.
So
I agree. I mean, when you don't get paid very much and you do one of the jobs that nobody else wants to do,
Yeah.
The unpaid carers as well.
yeah. Well,
Exactly.
last week I went to a meeting, a picnic for young carers, and these are kids who look after their parents and their siblings. And the carers in Britain, the Carers Week, which earlier this year they produced a figure. The value of unpaid care in this country each year is about £119 billion. The cost of the health service is £112 billion. So it exceeds the cost of the health service. These kids I met a couple of weeks ago are just extraordinary. I met one young boy whose mother has a compendium of health problems, none of which I knew about before I met them. And he looks after her. She has someone to look after in the day. He comes home from school. He's 11, and he looks after her in the evening and through the night and in the early morning. And he said to her she said without
He's
any...
11 years old.
Yeah, without any kind of malice, because she's been very ill this summer. This is the worst summer holiday I've ever had. And I thought, I have 6 grandchildren. They'd all been away that week.
Yes.
On the Isle of Wight. They have they're not, our family's not super rich or anything, but we're comfortable and they have a good life. And this poor little lad,
Yes.
there's no respite care.
No.
And there's another boy there who's 12, who has a sister, and she has 4 or 5 seizures a day. And his mum looks after the girl in the day. He comes home from school, his mum goes to work, and he looks after her in the evening. Now sometimes she's seriously ill. He has to put her in a comfortable position, call the ambulance and get her to hospital. Curiously, both of these boys are doing really well at school. But you only get one childhood, don't you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not getting a childhood. It's
a time when all the other kids are rebelling.
yeah, quite. And I'm afraid there's evidence that
Closer.
children who are doing care work like that are bullied at school for being different. They have all sorts of problems. So I'll add young carers to my list.
Yes, so carers are peacemakers. That when you give your life to another human being, that is an act of peace. So what we're trying to do is
they might
redefine
see
what
it.
peace is. No,
They might not see it like
I
that, but I
understand.
take your view.
but
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to
Yeah.
bring, a new shift in awareness
Yeah.
of being grateful for the acts of caring and peace
Yeah,
that we have
yeah.
here. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you very
Not
much.
at all.
That's brilliant.